I'm Melinda Joe. As Andy said, I'm a food writer based in Tokyo, Japan. It's my honor and a delight to be here with you today, especially because I'm so super pleased to be joined by two very distinguished guests, Chef Santiago Lastra of Cole in London, who is, please. This is his favorite part. This is his favorite part of the talk. Of Cole in London, making Mexican cuisine with British ingredients. I'm also really delighted to finally meet the very famous Mory Sacko, all the way from Paris. I was so fascinated by Mory because he is a French chef based in Paris, making cuisine that combines French and African and Japanese influences. Of course, I'm going to be really strict about that. No, I'm just kidding. But our topic today is cultural appropriation and finding identity in food. I think that cultural appropriation is a topic that is very widely discussed in North America, but maybe less so in other parts of the world. So I thought it would be helpful to define the term a little bit first. When we talk about cultural appropriation, what do we mean? So I found this great quote from an author called W. David Marks, who wrote a book called Status and Culture recently that I think sums it up really well. Appropriation is not a natural descriptor of intercultural borrowing. The term is grounded in questions of power and cultural politics. Cultural appropriation occurs when a majority group attempts to profit, whether for money or status, from the stylistic inventions of minority groups. Today, we'll talk a little bit about how to tell whether something is or isn't cultural appropriation, why we should care, and how chefs build their culinary identities with this in mind. So I've always been deeply interested in the concepts of culture and identity because I find it to be really problematic, and I think probably a lot of people do as well, in the kind of multicultural global society that we live in. As Andy mentioned, I live in Japan, but I'm actually Chinese American, which a lot of people find very confusing, especially the Japanese, and sometimes myself as well. But I actually grew up in Louisiana, so in the south of the United States, where my family had a restaurant, as a lot of Chinese immigrants do. We had a restaurant, and they served some classic Chinese American dishes like lo mein, alongside regional Louisiana dishes like shrimp etouffee, red beans and rice, and also some really interesting hybrids like Hunan crawfish or Szechuan alligator. This is really, really, really the dish. It's better than you think. It's actually really good. But the kind of interesting twist is that the theme of the restaurant was Polynesian. So I grew up around tiki torches and tiki gods and all of those tiki drinks. But keep in mind, this was like in the 80s, and my dad opened the restaurant in the 70s. So before you accuse my family of being a cultural appropriator, please believe me when I tell you that no indigenous Hawaiians were deprived of any kind of economic benefit based on my dad's restaurant in Shreveport, Louisiana. He was not trying to culturally appropriate. He was just trying to make a lot of Mai Tais. So with this in mind, I would like to start our conversation by asking you guys to tell us about some, to give us some examples of what you think are distinctly cultural appropriation cases or cases of intercultural borrowing, so positive or negative. I mean, Mory, perhaps we could start with you and the tacos.
Yeah.
The controversial.
So, I'm going to start. So, hello, everyone. So, I'm going to try to make it in English. So, my English is not the best, but can be
Sounds
okay.
pretty good. Sounds pretty good.
So to start, we have in France a good example of cultural appropriation with Santiago. We talk about it just past time. So it's a French brand who is called Otacos, but nothing is Mexican in this food except the tortilla. It's like just like a burrito with 3 sorts of meats and French fries inside and cheese, and just French people reject this. Say no, this is not Mexican. So now we have in France the French tacos, and it's really the problem. So the brands keep the name of tacos. So now in France, when we speak and we spoke about tacos, we have to say no, real tacos, because tacos in French is this. So we have to make the difference between the French tacos and the Mexican one. So
French tacos versus real tacos.
Yeah, versus real tacos. I didn't know which to choose, but I have my idea.
Santiago, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I actually saw the O tacos in Paris. I was there. I think last time that I was there, I think they've been escalating like crazy. Like, you see them everywhere. I think there's like hundreds of those O tacos, and it says the original French tacos. No?
Yeah,
that's like the slogan. And I mean, it's difficult to have an opinion of that, to be honest. I wasn't prepared for this until he mentioned it like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But I think it is an example. I mean, in one hand, it's a very, very admirable branding strategy. I think that is something that I will say that is that's pretty impressive. Like, how can you actually create a concept that where you understand your market so much that is going to like sell like tacos. Yeah. Like and then on the other hand, it's a little bit of a shame because it damages the image of Mexican culture in a way, because now it's not only about burritos that still like Tex-Mex food. You can have a really amazing Tex-Mex food in Texas. This one is just literally a brand that comes out of nowhere to, just to make profit. So I'm not a big fan of that. Nothing against.
At the same time, there are some examples that of people that you thought have been doing really great work, and as a tribute to Mexican cuisine.
Exactly. So I live in London, and there's a woman her name is Thomasina Myers, and she won the first MasterChef UK, and she wasn't a chef. She was just just a student, but she spent some holidays in Mexico, and she was like kind of like a passionate cook, and she won the show. And because it was the first one, it was like a sensation, like crazy. And then her prize was to open a restaurant, and she managed to open this Mexican restaurant called Oaxaca. And they had this massive line. Like, actually, my head chef at the moment, like, he was in the line with his mom when he was a kid. Like, it was like such a big success. And then suddenly they open another one, and now they have like, I don't know, like 20 something restaurants. That even if it's not like the most authentic or like organic or but I don't know, like the most, like, I don't know, like raw kind of small scale restaurant, it is a great example of bringing the image up, or introducing an image of another culture into your country. So, for example, when I was in London, I remember to be in an Uber, and then the Uber driver will be like, "Oh, your name is Santiago. Where are you from?" And I'm like, "I'm from Mexico." And they were like, "Oh, I love Mexican food. I've been in Oaxaca so many times." So then they actually, thanks to her and what she did to the community and organizing these big Day of the Dead parties and these Mexican Independence Day parties, and putting the community together and promote Mexico and be in television and open and make books and stuff like that, it really opens the door for me to go to Mexico and be to go to the UK and be quite appreciated, and yeah, and being able to not struggle so much in my offering, basically.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's somebody who, instead of taking an extractive approach towards Mexican cuisine, actually added something very important to a new community. But Mory, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's really important on the community because for me in France, I believe that we didn't have some chef who do some West or African cuisine in the restaurant. So for the West African and the African community in France, they are really proud to get this chef. And we have some customers, they are not the majority, but we have some customers who come from Africa who pass the door and they say, you're just proud to say, oh, it's our chef. So this community spirit is really important. I'm really grateful to get that because it's about to open the door of the fine dining restaurant to these people. For a lot of them, it's the first time, it's the first experience of fine dining for them. So it's important to me to say, okay, the African food is the popular food, but we can make it a fine dining food, and after that, we can go in every fine dining restaurant because some of them feel not concerned about the fine dining, so they have some idea about it, and when they finish their meal and the menu in my restaurant, they tell me, oh, okay, it's the first time in the fine dining restaurant, but now I want to see another restaurant. Look, it's cool for me to open this door for them and tell them, okay, you have the fine dining African restaurant, but all the fine dining are cool. It's okay for you to go. So it's really important.
So you mean that you feel like you're opening the door for African cuisine to be considered on the fine dining stage? Or is it also that you mean that the consumers opening the door to African guests in the fine dining restaurant?
The two. For me, it's about open the door for the African cuisine in the fine dining because we have the taste, we have the product, so just have to make it now. So I just have to show it's possible. So you have other cook, we're gonna make this and more and more and more. It's okay. So, but for the African, so French African like me, that doesn't mean about to go in the fine dining restaurant. So I have to open this door for them too and tell them, okay, it's okay to go to the fine dining restaurant in my house, but in every other fine dining restaurant. So you can go.
Right, so it's like allowing people to see themselves as belonging in that space as well. I mean, Santiago, would you say that that's something that that you also encounter?
Yeah. So actually, I remember when I was thinking about the concept or developing the concept of using inspiration from Mexico, but without using the ingredients. My biggest concern was the Mexican guests. So I was like, okay, why are they gonna say if it's not traditional? If you're in Mexico cooking and you're in Christmas or something, everyone will fight. Everyone will be like, oh no, I don't put that. Oh, you don't do that. It's a really big conflict in terms of the recipes of how you cook or what you do with that. So I thought that by opening the restaurant that the Mexican guests will be really critical about it. But actually, it turned out that it was the people that were more proud, and that they could really find this connection with the ideas and the inspiration that we have from flavors and from techniques and concepts. And also that you can tell that who is the Mexican guest in the table, because he's the one that is just with this big smile and saying oh yeah, and just waiting for the waiter to stop spilling the dish to tell to their friends. So it's yeah, so this is like that, this is that, and then it's like a storm of information coming out from these guests, and it's yeah, this is the Mexican guest, because and I think that is beautiful. It's beautiful to see how it's not about being critical about it, or it's about being like really understanding that there is a conversation in the table to promote culture and to share and share values, that are like like happening in this experience of like a fine dining experience that goes beyond just making a tasty menu that is delicious and is innovative. It's more about like what do you actually bring to the table in matter of culture.
Right, from a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
So again, like I think we jumped ahead a little bit, but I wonder if we could like talk a little bit about how you arrived at this place of actually concentrating on Mexican cuisine, because you started your career making different kinds of cuisine. And if I'm correct in thinking, one of the reasons that you wanted to focus on Mexican cuisine was, in fact, to correct some of the misinterpretations of Mexican cuisine that were out in the food world.
Yeah, so I started working when I was 15 in an Italian restaurant in my hometown in Cuernavaca. Because in Mexico, at the time that I was a kid, going to a restaurant, it didn't really mean to go to a Mexican restaurant. It was more like to go to a French restaurant, like if you like really special occasion, or Italian restaurant, also a really special occasion. But then you will not go to like a Mexican restaurant. Mexican was like more like everyday food. And so I started working there, and then I moved out, and I was in Europe for 10 years, and I always refused to buy Mexican food. Everyone will ask me like, "Oh, you're Mexican, make some Mexican food, for staff meal," and I was like, "No, I can't because I don't have the ingredients, I just like I couldn't even dare to try, and it was actually until I moved to Scandinavia that that I kind of understand that you can actually use the local ingredients and bring your own heritage to it. There was and techniques. There was this trend, like this way that they were making. I don't know, just miso with peas, or like garum with local herring and stuff like that. So then they were doing these things. So then it made me realize that I could use some of the techniques from Mexican cooking to the local ingredients, and then more and more traveling around Mexico, you realize that food and the actual like preparations, they come from the heart, soul, and tradition of the culture and the personality of how we are as Mexicans. And in different places as well. Like if you're in Slovenia, it's going to be different food than in Italy and in France. And even if you're like so close and the ingredients are so similar. So then that is the way that I come out with this idea of creating the concept, focusing on culture and the approach of the cooking more than the ingredients.
I wonder, though, for the other Mexican restaurants that were already in Britain, were they trying to use ingredients and everything from Mexico and making that their kind of real selling point, whereas you came and you did Mexican cuisine with British ingredients?
Yeah. I mean, like at the end of the day, people normally when they open a Mexican restaurant, they bring the ingredients that they can, and then a lot of people ask me like, oh, how you get your ingredients, that is like the most difficult thing that is true, like the most difficult thing, how can you get the best limes, and how do you get the best avocados, and how do you get the best, I don't know, mango and stuff like that, and that's a challenge. It's a big challenge in Europe, and that is why there's not a lot of really good restaurants like that, because it's just a massive challenge. But they do it, like they bring all the stuff. They're suppliers that they bring you all the ingredients, but there is no traceability, and also there's a lot of like canned cooking. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of things that you cannot get fresh, so then you just use it from the can and make sauces, like combining 4 different cans, and so then that's how these businesses operates. That I don't blame them, because it's difficult, but at the same time I think there is a scope to just use your local stuff, basically. Yeah,
definitely. But did you get any kind of criticism for that, or any confusion there?
I think more about frustration. When I was like, I moved to London, I'm gonna make this concept, and then I started making the dishes, and they were, you can ask my brother, they were not good, At the end of the day, it's been a process, because when you when you take out these things, then you're like literally, you kind of feel like in darkness, you know, like without lime and without all these ingredients that make Mexican food what it is. It's difficult to make, and so then at the first months it was very challenging, very, very challenging. You know?
But I think that you said earlier that that you kind of discovered through this journey of using British ingredients that the authenticity or the soul of Mexican cuisine is not tied specifically to the ingredients themselves or even to the place, but it's more about a philosophy and an approach. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, like the thing is that Mexican cooking has so many different variants, so many different influences from all around the world. If you go to like really indigenous Mexican cooking, it was purely like vegan. We had no animal fat, we had no cow, no milk, no pigs, no chickens. You know, it was just like a very, very specific. We call it milpa, that is corn, chili, beans, and pumpkin, and that's basically how insects. But then you get like the Spanish influence, and then the Japanese influence from people that were straight into Peru, and then you have like these people coming from like Middle East. And it's like a really big, like, mixture of cultures that make traditional Mexican food what it is. But what I think it is as well is that it depends on which region you are, the way that people will cook. Like if you're in like Oaxaca, like if you're in like Yucatan, people is like really chill. So then they will be in the hammock and it's really hot, and they'll be like, yeah, well, just take the pig, put it under the ground, and just sour orange and chilies. And then you go back to the hammock, and then in like 6 hours, 4 hours, it's ready, and then you just open it and eat amazing tacos with a salsa that is literally made with chilies and sour orange. That's it. But if you go to Oaxaca, people is like harsh, you know, like they're like really like they think about things a lot and like hard work. That is also it translates into the sauces. That is like to make a mole, it takes weeks. You know, they are there and they have like 100 ingredients and they toast them separately. And then these ones, they need to be blended like this. And then these ones, they need to burn and then salt and then sit for 2 days. And then you mill this and then you add chocolate to it. And it's like, it's such a complexity that is how people is. Like when you speak with them, they're like more like complex and deep. But then at the end of the day, they're all Mexican food. And it has a similar taste because of all the things that we watch in the TV and like we do together and we are as Mexicans. But the regional thing of it and the like kind of like national thing of Mexican cooking, you can feel it on the and I think it's really related to how people is. But if you're like in South Mexico, you have bananas and mangoes. But then if you're like in the central Mexico, and they will put that in the sauce. And then if you have like in north of Mexico, they have olives and they have like wheat, so they don't have corn. And then if you're like, I don't know, like depends on where you are, like you will have different ingredients that they add to the sauce. And then you go there and you ask, oh, why you put that in the sauce? And it's like, because we have it, you know?
Right.
And then at the end of the day, the ingredient is what you have. It's not like, oh, this like a specific ancient recipe. It's like what you have. But then the way that you put it together is how you are.
Right,
So
I
think
see.
that is,
So the kind of almost spiritual part to it. But I mean, do you think that being Mexican and having the Mexican restaurant in London, where it sounds like more of the Mexican restaurants were started by British people before, do you think it's been an advantage for you?
I think they've been really helping me a lot. Like I really feel really thankful for all the help that I have from the local community. There's not a lot of Mexican chefs in the UK, but it's probably because of there's no immigration to the UK as much, and I feel a lot of support from the local community, and I also feel that is an opportunity to kind of by doing what we do for other people to to embrace them doing similar things, so then the raise of the quality and the standard of Mexican cooking can grow organically.
That's great.
You know?
Well, Mory, I wanted to ask you about how your approach is totally different, because you are French, but you have a background, your West African background, and you have a personal love of Japanese culture and Japanese cuisine. Could you tell us a little bit about how, it's such a personal approach, like how you kind of came to create this style of cuisine?
So for me, it's really a really personal cuisine, because for me, the African way, typically the West African food, is from my mom. So it's the cuisine I hate, the dish I hate from my childhood to from I'm a teenager. And for the French cuisine, so I have to learn it at the school. So before I start the cuisine school, I never cook. so the first time I cooked, it was at the French cuisine. So I didn't know what is the blanquette, what is the bourguignon. So I have to learn it. So all my cuisine skills and my technical skills are the French, typically the French chef technique. So I have to use my African background and mix it with my French techniques. So for the Japan, it's only about passion. So I have to go to discover what is the sushi, what is the onigiri, and after that I have a lot of my colleagues who teach me how to make a dashi, what is the miso soup, and for me the Japanese way is really about human. So I learn it with my colleagues. They show me everything I want to know. So because I'm so passionate about the kaiseki cuisine, so the big Japanese cuisine with the sushi and everything like that. But I'm passionate about the popular Japanese cuisine, so the curry rice or the omurice. It's really, for me, the Japanese culture is important, and I have to bring back this with me. And when I open the restaurant, first I want to make a French African restaurant. So when I started the first tasting and other things like that, I said, no. I want just to make the cuisine that I want to know to do, and I just go and mix them together. So I use my French skills with the African recipe, the African spices and chili. Everything is in my head at this moment, and the Japanese product. Well, now I know how to use it. I know how to change it too, and for me it's really natural. It's always about sensibility.
But you've never been to Japan.
No, I never been to Japan. This is really important to me to say it, because I'm not an authority to say it's Japanese food. This is the difference for me. It's just to tribute to Japan. So I love the Japanese culture. I love the Japanese food, but it's my Japanese food.
Right.
So it's like that. It's very, very important for me to say to my customer and others, you don't gonna eat Japanese food, you don't eat French food or African food. It's really a personal food. So maybe you're gonna eat a traditional Ivoirian dish who's made with cassava fermented, and after that you have a yajiro soup from Japan, and mix this with a brioche with truffle, and everything is the same for me.
I wonder, though, how different people react to your cuisine based on their own background. So, for example, a lot of your guests are from France, and then also either African French or Africans, and then also Japanese. So, does every different kind of guest react in a different way based on their culture?
Yeah, it's really... they ask really different reacts. And for the French people, it's all about curiosity. They come with an open mind, and they just want to discover what means about African fine dining, about Japanese and African mixed together with French cuisine, with French product too. And it's really about curiosity. So I'm really surprised because they're really curious about the African way. So, because between the Japanese France, it's a big love story. So French know about the Japanese food. So the African one is really typically for them a new thing. So they're really curious to know what is this product, where it's from, because the first mix I do in my cuisine is about the Africa, because we spoke about Africa like it's a country, but Africa is really big, and we don't eat at the same dish in the West Africa, where my mother and my parents are from. In the East Africa in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, they are maybe like vegan, or they eat a lot of vegetables, and it's not the same cuisine. And the Central African, you have jungle, so they have a lot of peppers and chili and some leaves that didn't have names, just using the sauce. And the first confluence is in Africa, so I have to explain them. Yeah, you have the West African, with the well-known in France, but you have the East Africa. So it's because the East Africa food is really interesting, because it's in the world of the spices, and a lot of dish are like, when you eat it, you say, oh, it's a curry. It's like Indian food. It's like Asiatic food. It's really mixed above. So we have to mix them together. So explain to the French consumer what is African food. And in Africa, we have the West, the East, the Central, and the South African food. So all are different. So the notion of terroir is in Africa too. So it's really important to explain that. So we have the African customer. They come, they are really proud. Let's go, we're gonna see our chef. And it's about to surprise them too. I just made a typical dish, and it's a dish. No, I have to mix and surprise them too. So I have to mix to make some dish like the attiéké. It's really a typical dish from Ivory Coast. It's the cassava fermented like sumo, and just we made it in the ways I never seen before. And
I wonder, though, if the Japanese guests have a really different reaction, because a lot of times Japanese guests can be Japanese people can be very protective of their cuisine, but coming into this sort of situation, what's it like for them?
So the Japanese customers, they come to see. Really, they have just, some of them say, I just want to know what's the Japanese and African cook. So they're really surprised first by the Japanese technique. When I made the dashi or the onsen tamago, they told me, oh, it tastes like Japan. So they are really surprised because I don't have the head of the typical Japanese style. So, and
well, actually, some Japanese people do have the hair.
Yeah,
but
not like that. And I was really surprised by the interest they have for the African food. So I opened the door for them from the African culture. Because when you talk about food, we talk about culture too. So the Japanese are not known much about African culture. So they told me, wow, this is African food. It's like that. And I can see they want to know more about African culture, African food. So it's really interesting for me to see that, because it's not the principal project, but the Japanese people want to see more and to know more about the African food, and they ask me a lot of questions.
So you feel yourself to be more of a bridge between these cuisines and sort of opening the door for different discoveries between them?
It's really to make some bridge between these different cultures. For me, the cuisine and the food is all about culture, and the best way to discover another culture is just take a seat and eat my food. It's really important. And in my restaurant, it's that. So Japanese discover African food, the African discover Japanese food, and the French discover both. And this is just what we do in the restaurant.
I just wonder also for both of you, but maybe like Mory, if we could ask, like, how closely related is the idea of race to your culinary identity and your personal identity? I mean, like, people always say, I don't see race, But I don't think that's true because, like, for people, especially like us, like that's literally the first thing you see is our race, right? And we'll never look at a different way. And so I just wonder how that affects you as a chef and as a person.
So the rest exists. So we see that. So for me, it's all about mentality and personality to assume that. So yes, I have the African roots. Yes, I'm the French because I'm born and raised and studied in France. So I'm typically a Frenchman. But I have my African origins, West African origins, and I'm proud of them. So it's really important to be aware with this, and to be French cannot be, comment dire, cannot stop me to be proud of to be African too. So we have to, I think, if I am aware of this and proud of this, people see that and like a mirror, they told me, okay, it's cool. So for me, it's really easy to be a Frenchman and an African man.
Sure, but also to be a black person, a black chef cooking at this like high level with so much attention is pretty rare, right? Like maybe the only one perhaps. And like, I mean, how do you feel about that? Is that a lot of responsibility for you?
Is the responsibility, of course. I have a lot of responsibility, but it's the good responsibility to show to the young black people, yeah, you can be footballer, you can be rapper, but it's not the only target you can have. You can be cook, and the value of the cook as the values were awesome for me. We're talking about work, we're talking about respect, we're talking about tradition, and just it's cool. So I have a lot of responsibility, so I can't fuck up because they told me, show him it's a black chef, so he fucked up, it's okay. So no. So it's responsibility, but I just have to transform this in something positive. So say, okay, it's cool, but I'm not alone. Other black chefs are here. We don't see that now, but they're gonna come, and maybe in 10 years, I'm not gonna be alone.
I mean, Santiago, for you, is it ever something that you really think about or conscious of? I know Mexican's not a race, but you know what I mean? And also your brother looks kind of Asian, so.
Agree.
Yeah. But I mean, does it affect you, or is it something you ever think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a decision. I made a decision when I left Mexico. When I was 18, I was like, okay, I'm gonna move out, and you see it as I see it as an opportunity. I wanted to leave, and just learn, and and then and everyone. I remember in the airport, like everyone was like my mom and my brother. They were really proud, and everyone, like my aunt, okay, like. You made it. You leave Mexico, like. It's like it was like that kind of sensation
really?
that I had. Yeah, I had it. Like I was like, man, like I achieve it. Like I have a job in Spain. That is like for me that was my dream of my life. Like I was 3 years old. I remember one of my first memories was to see the World Cup with my grandfather, and I was like, man, like one day it doesn't matter what I do, I want to visit the world, I want to see all these, like meet people from all these countries, and in Mexico you're not so close. Like it's not like it's not something like you live in Europe and then you can just go to France like straight away. Like if you don't have the economical possibilities, you never visit anywhere else like in your life, And there is people that they never visit another country in their lives. And for me, it was my dream. And I remember to get this job in Spain, I was like, I made it. Like I literally just did it. And but then after that, it becomes like, and then you want to blend in. You want to blend in. You're an immigrant, so you want to blend in. You're there, and it's like okay. So I was like, okay, I'm Spain, I'm Spanish. I need to like learn the culture of Spain and like all the stories and like all the music and like all the accent and the phrases and the chefs and like, you know, like the food, you know, and you just like close your mind into like a mindset of like, I'm here and I'm gonna learn and I'm gonna try and I'm gonna change. And it was never like, okay, I'm gonna be a Mexican chef. Mm-hmm. It was more like, I'm here and I need to like, and I was in the kitchen and I was the Mexican guy. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, Mexican guy. Mm-hmm. You know, and I wasn't like they knew more than me. Like I didn't know how to make the lamb feet stew. You know, I never saw lamb feet in my life. You know, so then and even a cabbage. You know, like cabbage. I never like cook a cabbage. You know, mm-hmm. like I don't like in Mexico you don't have cabbage. Mm-hmm. You have cabbage, but you just like cut it and put it on top of fish tacos raw, mm-hmm. you know. But then it's like 5 different types of stews and beef cheeks and all these things. I have no clue of how to do it. But then they had all this knowledge, so I had to keep up, you know. And then when you move to Copenhagen, same, you know, like so then every time that you move as a foreigner, mm-hmm. You are there to learn, but also you understand in a way that the language and the culture and the knowledge, it's against you in a way, you know, like you don't know the same as they do. Do you know other things, but then those things, you never know that they are actually helpful for you. Like for so many years, it was like, I knew all these things about Mexico, but they were not useful for me. Ah, okay. I could not like say like, actually, I'm not doing the feats, I'm doing guacamole. Right. Side, you know? The chef will be like, you know, like, so then that is the thing that you have to understand. There's a moment where you get quite depressed actually, because you're like, man, I don't know how to cook, you know, like, it's just like, it's every place that you go is different, and you're always the guy that doesn't know. But then there is a point that you're like, that then you realize that your heritage and you have the possibility to do something. And your culture is going to give you that opportunity, and that is when everything changed. And then that is how like you get a bit more confident on being and learning more about your culture, because it's actually a tool that you realize that you don't know what everyone knows, but they don't know what you know. Right. Yeah. And that is what opens you the doors. Right. You know? Yeah, Mory.
Yeah, I agree. So it's really you take an advantage. Oh.
Oh, have we already we already gotten over the time? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so
the last one.
Okay, so all right, you guys go ahead.
I have to go on.
Well, but, I mean, the whole thing I wanted to ask you, the last question would just be, I mean, you know, how, like, the whole point of why cultural appropriation is a bad thing and something that we are talking about even today is that it comes down to opportunities. And how can we create more opportunities for people to be funded and promoted and to make a more diverse culinary landscape? Both of you guys could just, if you could just give like one.
Right, yeah. I think, as I was saying before, I think something like culture, sometimes people think about cultural appropriation as something that is quite against the guy that is coming to your place. Like if you see it like if you are an immigrant and moving to another country, I think the way to have a possibility or opportunities, it's for you to also understand where you're moving from and the culture, and then like that try to find a middle ground to create a concept or to build your own opportunity around the community. I think that is really important.
Mory?
And for me, the most important thing is all about sensibility and respect. So the cultural appropriation is all about this. So if I am really sincere, if I just show some respect for the culture, it's okay. So it's just about respect. So for me, just this change is appropriate culturation or not. So just respect the culture. And for me, it's essentially the population is more and more multicultural. And all this culture, when we mix them together, we have something new. Donc, we can't just block the people inside with the box. So just open the box, let it go, but just with respect.
Okay, thank you so much.